Imagine standing in a courtroom, staring directly at the person who shattered your world. The law promises justice, but as the proceedings unfold, the punishment doesn't match the pain. What do you do when the system fails you? Today we look at 4 parents who took justice into their own hands and brutally killed child predators in court. Richard Gross. It's October 2nd, 2023, and a courtroom in Las Vegas faces a scene reminiscent of Marianne Bachmeier's infamous act of justice. Only this time, it's not a grieving parent seeking retribution, it's the survivor himself. Tyler Fu, now a man at 29 years old, confronts Richard Gross, the predator who stole his childhood, in a moment of raw emotion. What happens next? This case began when Tyler Fu came forward, revealing years of sexual abuse he had endured as a child at the hands of Gross. The details were chilling. Gross had groomed Fu, exploiting the child's trust and dependency. Fu's revelations led to Gross being charged with 26 felony counts of child sexual abuse. However, Gross entered an Alford plea to a single count of attempted lewdness with a child under 14. This allowed him to avoid admitting guilt while acknowledging that the evidence against him was strong enough for a conviction. The judge, also citing Gross's advanced age and deteriorating health, handed down a suspended sentence of 60 to 180 months. He was also required to register as a sex offender and adhere to specific probationary conditions, including restrictions on his residence and activities. This meant Gross would avoid prison time unless he violated the conditions. Fu, sitting in the courtroom, could hardly believe what he was hearing. His abuser, a man who had robbed him of his childhood, was essentially walking free. The system had failed, but Fu wasn't about to let this predator get away so easily. As soon as Gross was about to leave the courtroom, Fu approached and punched him squarely in the face, sending the older man tumbling to the floor. Gross briefly lost consciousness, and the courtroom erupted in chaos. Security quickly intervened, restraining Fu and arresting him on a misdemeanor battery charge. Gross was taken to a hospital for evaluation, but the physical damage was minor. Fu later expressed his frustration, stating, "I was extremely angry. It just doesn't make sense how someone can abuse a child multiple times and just walk away without any prison time." In January 2024, the battery charge against Fu was dismissed. Madison. In July 2013, East Cleveland residents were troubled by a foul odor near a garage leased to Madison. Responding to complaints, police investigated and discovered a decomposing body inside a plastic bag. This grim finding led to a broader search, revealing 2 more bodies nearby, one in a backyard and another in the basement of a vacant house. Each victim was wrapped in plastic, and their remains were found within a 100 to 200 yard radius. The victims were identified as Shatisha Sheely, 28, Angela Deskins, 38, and Sherelda Terry, 18. Sheely had been missing since September 2012. Deskins was reported missing in June 2013, and Terry was last seen on July 10, 2013, after leaving her summer job at a Cleveland elementary school. Upon obtaining a search warrant, authorities entered Madison's apartment and found further evidence of decomposition, strengthening the case against him. Following a brief standoff at his mother's house, he was arrested without incident. Now, Madison wasn't an unfamiliar name to law enforcement. His criminal record was already marked with a history of violence and deviance. Back in 2002, he had been convicted of attempted rape, serving 4 years in prison. Upon release, he was registered as a offender, but like too many others in the system, he slipped through the cracks. For more than a decade, he lived under the radar, blending into the background of East Cleveland, until the day his name would resurface in a way that no one could ignore. When Madison was arrested, he admitted to being influenced by Anthony Soule, another Cleveland area serial killer whose gruesome acts had made headlines just a few years earlier. The trial began in 2016, and it was as shocking as the crimes themselves. In the courtroom, the details of his actions unfolded, one horrifying revelation after another. The evidence was damning, and Madison's lack of remorse was evident to everyone present. One of the most unforgettable moments in the trial came during the sentencing phase. Van Terry, the father of Sherelda Terry, stood before the court to speak about the impact Madison's actions had on his family. Looking directly at Madison, who smirked in response, Terry's emotions boiled over. In a moment of raw grief and anger, he lunged at the man who had taken his daughter's life. The courtroom erupted in chaos. The jury deliberated for less than a day before finding Madison guilty on all counts. The judge handed down the ultimate punishment, the death sentence. But even as the sentence was upheld by the Ohio Supreme Court in 2020, Madison's case continued to linger in the justice system. Execution dates have been postponed as appeals wind their way through the courts, a process that leaves victims' families in limbo. Klaus Grabowski. Imagine sitting in a courtroom, expecting justice to unfold in its structured way. But instead, in the blink of an eye, the accused is dead, and the grieving mother becomes the executioner. This isn't the plot of a film, it's the real story of Klaus Grabowski and Marianne Bachmeier, a tale of the lengths one parent went to when the system wasn't enough. Klaus Grabowski was no stranger to the legal system. A 35-year-old butcher from Lübeck, West Germany, had already been convicted and served time for abusing 2 young girls. In 1976, during his detention, he underwent castration. Later, though, he sought hormone treatment to reverse its effects, a decision that would have tragic consequences for 7-year-old Anna Bachmeier. Anna's story began on an ordinary day in May 1980, when she decided to skip school after a disagreement with her mother. This small act of rebellion led her into the path of Grabowski, who lured her into his home under the guise of showing her his pet cats. What followed was an act of calculated evil. Grabowski held Anna captive, eventually strangling her with a pair of his fiancée's tights. He then placed her body in a cardboard box and abandoned it near a canal, attempting to erase any trace of his crime. The community was horrified by Anna's disappearance and subsequent murder. However, Grabowski's fiancée played a crucial role in his arrest by informing the police of his confession to the crime, and he was brought to trial very soon. On the 3rd day of the trial, though, Bachmeier had made a decision that would forever alter the course of her life. She smuggled a small pistol, a .22 caliber Beretta, into the courtroom, concealing it in her handbag. As the trial proceeded, Grabowski's defense attempted to paint a picture of a man misunderstood and wrongly accused, claiming that Anna had tried to manipulate him. It was a statement that cut through Bachmeier's heart like a knife. She had listened to enough. At that moment, sitting in the courtroom gallery, she took out the pistol, stood up, and fired. The scene was chaos. 7 shots rang out, 6 of them hitting Grabowski in the back. The courtroom erupted in screams as onlookers scrambled for cover. Grabowski collapsed to the floor, dead almost instantly. Court security rushed to restrain Bachmeier, who made no attempt to flee. She surrendered the gun and calmly admitted to the shooting. Marianne Bachmeier was immediately arrested and charged with murder, sparking intense public debate. During her trial, Bachmeier testified about her motivations. She admitted she couldn't bear to hear Grabowski justify his actions or tarnish her daughter's memory any longer. The court ultimately rejected the charge of murder, convicting her of manslaughter and unlawful possession of a firearm. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but served only 3 before being released on probation. Elwell was convicted of failing to register as a offender, a requirement stemming from prior offenses. Despite this conviction, he managed to evade significant legal repercussions for nearly a decade. However, in June 2017, his predatory behavior resurfaced in a most disturbing manner. During a weekend in late June, Elwell was staying at a residence in Dover. Among the occupants were 3 young girls, 2 4-year-olds and a 9-year-old. Exploiting the trust of those around him, Elwell lured one of the 4-year-old girls into a secluded area and subjected her to sexual assault. The innocence of a child was shattered in those moments, leaving scars that would last a lifetime. The assault came to light when the young victim exhibited behavioral changes, prompting concern from her guardians. Upon gentle inquiry, the child revealed the traumatic experience she had endured. Law enforcement was notified, leading to Elwell's arrest. Initially, he denied the allegations, attempting to cast doubt on the child's testimony. However, as evidence mounted, including testimonies from the other children present, Elwell confessed to his reprehensible actions. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. In November 2017, Elwell entered a guilty plea, likely seeking a more lenient sentence in exchange for sparing the young victim from the ordeal of testifying in court. The sentencing was scheduled for December, when the court would determine the consequences of his actions. On the day, family members of the victim, legal professionals, and other observers filled the seats, awaiting the judge's decision. Elwell, shackled and wearing prison attire, stood before the judge as the sentence was pronounced: 7.5 to 15 years in state prison, along with mandatory registration as a offender upon release. As Elwell was escorted to the back of the courtroom to await transport, he was seated next to another inmate, Josiah Davies, who was present for an unrelated arraignment. Without warning, Davies, despite being shackled, lunged at Elwell and delivered multiple headbutts before court officers intervened. The 2 men had no prior acquaintance. It is believed that Davies became aware of Elwell's crimes during the proceedings and was provoked into attacking him. The incident was captured on courtroom surveillance and later circulated widely. If you found this video interesting and want to see more stories like this, subscribe and click on the videos displayed on your screen right now. Each one delves into shocking cases, untold truths, and eye-opening revelations that will keep you thinking long after they're over. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.